Just have a couple of quick words. First of all, and most importantly, this is a devastating tragedy that has befallen the Reiner family. We all recognize that. Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case.
Steven Spielberg and Rob Reiner, two cinematic powerhouses who reshaped film history in ways the world will never forget. Spielberg, the master of heart-pounding emotion and edge-of-your-seat suspense, and Reiner, the genius behind those warm, feel-good comedies that could make you laugh 1 second and tear up the next. Their connection wasn't built on Hollywood competition. It was built on deep admiration and mutual respect. They were friends who shared laughs at award shows, spoke about storytelling like it was their religion, and always rooted for each other's success. That's why the devastating news of Rob's sudden passing crushed Spielberg to his core. The cheerful friend he'd recently hugged had become a painful memory overnight. Just 2 months earlier, Spielberg had seen Rob glowing with joy at an intimate gathering, proudly sharing that his son, Nick, had overcome his personal struggles and was finally home again, surrounded by love and peace. Spielberg later recalled that Rob's happiness that night felt almost contagious, a kind of light you don't forget. They had talked about new projects, new dreams, and new films they hoped to bring to life together. No one could have imagined that just weeks later, tragedy would strike in a way no one saw coming. That same son, Nick, would soon face accusations of being involved in a shocking family tragedy that left Hollywood in disbelief. On December 14, 2025, the film industry froze in silence as the heartbreaking news spread. Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were gone.
Nick Reiner, who was accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer Reiner. These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of multiple murders.
Spielberg, devastated beyond words, broke his silence in a trembling voice. Through tears, he said Rob wasn't just a collaborator, he was a true friend, a creative brother who shared the same passion for human stories. Every word Spielberg spoke carried unbearable pain and disbelief, a reflection of how deeply this loss tore through Hollywood's heart. For anyone who cherishes meaningful, human-centered cinema, losing Rob Reiner feels like losing a piece of film history itself. Rob had that rare, irreplaceable magic. He could bring people together through laughter, honesty, and emotion that felt so real it stayed with you forever. Spielberg's eyes were full of sorrow as he spoke quietly, remembering the times they worked side by side, dreaming up stories that would outlive them both. He remembered their first meeting, 2 ambitious dreamers with cameras in hand, both determined to change the world through the art of film. Spielberg said Rob always stood out, not for ego or fame, but for his warmth, his insight, his way of seeing straight into a character's soul. Spielberg's hands trembled slightly as he remembered. When you watched Rob work, you didn't just see a movie, you felt it. His words carried raw emotion, echoing the legacy of a man whose films will forever remind the world what true storytelling feels like. Every one of Rob Reiner's films was packed with laughter, tears, and pure meaning. He wasn't just the man behind The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, or Stand By Me. He was a creative storm who taught the world unforgettable lessons about friendship, love, and the painful beauty of growing up. Spielberg once said that Rob's stories reminded people that cinema isn't just art, it's emotion, it's connection, it's life itself. But as Spielberg reflected on Rob's legacy, his voice grew heavy with sorrow. He spoke softly, saying Rob left behind a lifetime of work that would live forever, yet this sudden tragedy carved a hole that nothing could ever fill. The moment he heard the devastating news, Spielberg reached out to the Reiner family, offering his deepest condolences and love. In his message, Spielberg expressed that Rob and Michelle weren't just beloved Hollywood icons. They were family to everyone lucky enough to know them. He wrote that Rob was a wonderful friend, an extraordinary colleague, and a storyteller who illuminated the hearts of millions. Spielberg added that Rob's passing wasn't just the loss of a filmmaker, it was the dimming of a bright light that once made Hollywood feel more human. He called him a creative spirit who made people feel seen, heard, and understood. Then came something almost no one had ever heard before, a deeply personal memory Spielberg decided to share, one that peeled back the curtain on a side of Rob's life few had seen. It happened a few years earlier at a small private gathering in Hollywood. The night buzzed with laughter and old stories. A warm, nostalgic energy filled the room. But in one quiet corner, Spielberg noticed something that didn't fit the mood. Rob stood alone, glass of wine in hand, his face distant, weighed down by thoughts he couldn't hide. Spielberg walked over, gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder, and said, "It's been too long, my friend. You don't look like yourself. What's going on?" Rob looked at him for a long, heavy moment before releasing a deep sigh. Without a word, he gestured for Spielberg to follow him outside. Under the soft city lights on the balcony, far from the laughter and noise, Rob finally spoke. He confessed that his son Nick had been struggling, fighting personal battles, slipping into addiction, and losing control of his life. Spielberg could still remember the pain in Rob's voice, that raw heartbreak only a father could feel. He was trying to be both a parent and a friend, Spielberg said quietly, but he felt powerless. Rob tried to hide it behind a smile, but Spielberg saw the truth clear as day. Behind that strong, creative spirit was a man silently drowning in fear and heartbreak, a father watching his child crumble and not knowing how to stop it. That night, Spielberg said, would stay burned into his memory forever. As the two spoke beneath the city glow, Rob's voice trembled, his guard falling away as years of pain came spilling out. "Steven, you know, Nick's been struggling for so long," he said quietly, words that Spielberg would never forget. It all began when Nick was just a teenager, first experimenting, then falling deep into dangerous habits, heroin, cocaine, one rehab after another, each time sinking a little further. Rob's eyes, heavy with exhaustion, stared into the darkness beyond the balcony that night. "We tried everything," he said quietly, voice trembling. "Michelle and I sent him to the best recovery centers, kept him close at home, hoping love would be enough. But every time he got better, he'd fall again." The weight of his words hung thick in the night air. It was like the whole world stopped for a second. Rob took a breath and said, "I even made being Charlie with him. Thought maybe telling our story would heal something. Maybe it would bring us closer again as a family." His voice cracked as he tried to steady himself. For a while it worked. He was clean. He was trying. But now it's happening again. "And I'm scared, Steven. I'm scared I'll lose him completely." Spielberg sat beside him, quiet, listening with the kind of understanding only a friend could offer. "Rob, you've done everything a father can do," he told him softly. "Nick's lucky to have parents who never gave up." But Rob just shook his head, staring down at the ground, his voice breaking. "We've tried so hard. We followed the doctor's advice. But maybe we should have listened more to him. I just want to save my son, but the harder I try, the more helpless I feel." They sat there in silence, two men surrounded by the soft hum of the city, sipping wine, lost in thought. One pouring out his deepest heartbreak, the other quietly absorbing every word. Spielberg later said he'd never forget that night. He could feel how much Rob loved his son, how desperate he was to keep his family from falling apart, and how powerless he felt watching it all slip away. Years passed, the world moved on, but that balcony moment etched itself into Spielberg's memory forever. The quiet confessions, the fear in Rob's voice, the pain that no camera could ever capture. Years passed, the world moved on, but that memory stayed vivid, almost haunting. And then, in 2025, fate would bring them back together once more, in a way no one could have ever predicted. It was October again, the night of the Governor's Awards, hosted by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles. The air shimmered with glamour, filled with Hollywood legends, flashing cameras, and echoes of its golden age. As Spielberg stepped into the grand hall, his eyes immediately caught sight of Rob across the room, radiant, laughing, surrounded by old friends, glowing like the man he used to be. The sight warmed Spielberg's heart instantly. He made his way through the crowd and pulled Rob into a tight hug, the kind only shared between two brothers who'd faced the same storms of life and art. "Rob, you look fantastic," Spielberg said with a huge grin. "How have you been?" Rob's face lit up like a sunrise. "Steven, you won't believe it," he said, eyes gleaming with genuine happiness. "Nick's home. He's been doing so much better. Clean for months, working small jobs, talking with us again. It finally feels like things are turning around." Spielberg could feel that rush of warmth deep in his chest. After years of watching his friend fight through fear and heartbreak, this moment felt like a miracle. He placed a hand on Rob's shoulder, smiling with real pride. "That's incredible, Rob. You and Michelle never stopped fighting for him. This is the light you both deserve." The two spent the night catching up, reminiscing about their early filmmaking days, trading old jokes, and sharing stories that made them laugh until tears rolled down their faces. Spielberg later said there was something different about Rob that night, a peace in his eyes, a calmness in his smile that hadn't been there in years. He seemed free, lighter, almost reborn. But life, as always, has a cruel way of turning joy into heartbreak overnight. When Spielberg later recalled that evening, his voice went soft, almost breaking. "Who could have imagined," he said, "that just a few months later in December, everything would fall apart?" The happiness he'd seen glowing in Rob's eyes that night would become a haunting final memory, frozen in time, just before tragedy struck and shattered Hollywood's heart. Spielberg said he could still remember that gut-wrenching feeling the morning he read the news of Rob's family tragedy. "It didn't feel real," he whispered. "It was like hope itself had been snuffed out." He remembered standing by the window that day, staring into the distance as his mind replayed every second of that last meeting. "I told Rob that day," Spielberg said quietly, "I'm happy for you." And now, that sentence echoes in his memory, a bittersweet goodbye he never realized he was saying. "Hold on to hope." That's what Rob had said that night, smiling with eyes that shimmered with quiet confidence. But now, looking back, Spielberg could only reflect on how fragile that hope truly was. Life, he thought, always finds ways to twist when you least expect it. In the days following the heartbreaking news, Spielberg found himself returning to The Princess Bride, his favorite of all Rob's creations. He watched it through tears, whispering along to that unforgettable line, "As you wish." At that moment, a soft smile crossed his face as he murmured, "Rob, you lived with purpose, and we'll remember you forever." When Spielberg finally released his public message of condolence, it was brief but soaked in emotion. He wrote, "Rest peacefully, my friends Rob and Michelle. You've left behind a legacy of love, laughter, and creativity that nothing can ever erase." That day, the entire film world felt dimmer, like a light had gone out. But Spielberg believed deeply that Rob's legacy would never fade, that it would continue glowing through every frame, every smile, and every tear his films inspired. Even though Spielberg and Reiner weren't constant collaborators, what they shared was something much deeper: mutual admiration, genuine friendship, and creative respect that lasted a lifetime. Both men were storytellers to their core, artists who saw cinema not just as entertainment, but as a language of the soul. They grew up in Jewish homes surrounded by art, imagination, and music, an upbringing that filled their work with emotional honesty and heart. That shared cultural foundation became the heartbeat of their storytelling, a bridge that connected their different cinematic worlds. Rob's films dove deep into human emotion, exploring relationships, humor, and personal struggle with fearless sincerity. Spielberg's movies, on the other hand, soared through wonder, fear, and awe, grand adventures that still managed to hit straight to the heart. Their tones may have been different, but their message was the same: that love, courage, and humanity are what truly make life beautiful. They appeared side by side countless times, at festivals, award nights, and creative panels, always lifting each other up with genuine respect. Rob once praised Spielberg, saying, "The way he blends emotion and visual storytelling is something every director should learn from." And Spielberg, in turn, often said he admired how Rob could capture human truth with such warmth and simplicity, reminding everyone that stories don't need explosions to move hearts. They just need honesty. So when Spielberg speaks about Rob today, it's more than just grief, it's reverence. He's honoring a man who didn't just make movies, but made people feel. A man who lived for his art and poured his heart into every story he told. And as the world shifts its gaze from the man Spielberg mourns to the storyteller Spielberg himself has become, one question lingers in the air. What is it that makes Steven Spielberg's own storytelling so powerful, so timeless, and so deeply human? How did Steven Spielberg master the rare art of blending light, sound, and emotion into pure cinematic magic that still moves people decades later? Let's rewind the reel and see where it all began. Steven Allen Spielberg was born on December 18, 1946, in Cincinnati, Ohio, the oldest child and only son in a loving, tight-knit Jewish family of Eastern European roots. His father, Arnold, was a brilliant electrical engineer, always surrounded by the hum and buzz of early computers. His mother, Leah, was pure sunshine, a gifted pianist whose laughter filled their home with warmth and melody. Their house was alive with love, but also constant motion. Arnold's job meant frequent relocations, packing up and starting over again and again. For young Steven, that meant saying goodbye to friends, schools, and familiar streets. Every move a new beginning that felt both thrilling and lonely. Those endless changes shaped him early, teaching him how fragile comfort could be, and how imagination could become a safe place when the world around you kept shifting. That restlessness, born from always being the new kid, would one day fuel Spielberg's greatest gift, finding magic and meaning in uncertainty. Spielberg once said, "Every time we moved, I felt like I lost a part of myself." But through all that change, he gained something priceless: the ability to observe, to listen, and to understand people deeply. Constantly adapting made him quiet but perceptive, the kind of kid who noticed every emotion in a room, every unspoken word. It was that silent curiosity that later became the heart of his storytelling. When he was just 6 years old, his parents took him to see The Greatest Show on Earth by Cecil B. DeMille, and it changed his life forever. As the lights dimmed and the circus roared to life on the big screen, little Steven sat frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding, completely mesmerized. Walking out of the theater, still buzzing from the experience, he clutched his mother's hand and whispered, "I want to make things that scare people, and make them feel joy like that." Leah smiled warmly and replied, "Then, my dear Stevie, you must first learn to tell stories." That one line stuck with him forever. It became his compass. At just 12 years old, his father gifted him an 8mm camera, a small gesture that would change the course of cinema history. From that moment on, Spielberg filmed everything: family vacations, toy train crashes, backyard adventures, even little dramas starring his sisters. He'd shout, "You play the victims, I'll be the hero who saves everyone." Those grainy, homemade short films became his playground, his way of experimenting, dreaming, and learning how to control emotion through a lens. What started as childhood fun slowly turned into a lifelong obsession, crafting stories that could make people laugh, scream, and cry, often all at once. Even then, you could already see the spark of the filmmaker who would one day capture the world's imagination forever. That little camera became the place where Spielberg first learned to take fear and chaos and turn them into pure art. But life outside that small world wasn't so magical. When the family moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 1957, everything changed. Steven suddenly found himself one of the few Jewish kids in his school, and the world around him wasn't always kind. He later opened up about the pain, the bullying, the loneliness, and that constant feeling of being an outsider. "I always wondered why I was different," he once admitted, "so I started watching the world instead of being part of it." That quiet observation became his superpower. Those early experiences planted the deep roots of empathy, the same empathy that would later pulse through every frame of his films, making audiences feel his stories instead of just watching them. At just 13 years old, Spielberg made a 40-minute war film called Escape to Nowhere. It was scrappy, emotional, and full of passion, and it won first place at a local youth competition. That small victory gave him a taste of what storytelling could do. By 16, he was all in. He poured every dollar he had into Firelight, a 2-hour sci-fi film that played for one night in a small theater. Only a few dozen people showed up, but to him, it felt like a Hollywood premiere. Walking out of that theater, Spielberg told himself, "Someday, people will line up to watch my movies." That same summer, while filming home videos on a family camping trip, young Steven's life quietly shifted. Through his lens, he accidentally captured something he wasn't meant to see: his mother, Leah, holding hands with Bernie Adler, his father's closest friend. His heart sank. Shaken, he turned off the camera and kept that painful secret locked away for 3 long years. When his parents divorced in 1965, his father Arnold took all the blame, protecting Leah without telling Steven the truth. Spielberg, who had moved to California with his dad, felt betrayed and confused. One day, overcome with anger, he shouted, "You destroyed this family!" Arnold didn't defend himself. He just nodded, silent, taking the pain on his shoulders. That moment burned into Steven's heart, leaving a wound that would take 15 years to heal. Father and son eventually made peace, but that emotional scar never really left. It became fuel for his art. The tension between love and loss, trust and betrayal, family and forgiveness. Those themes became Spielberg's signature, the emotional heartbeat behind so many of his films. Every close-up, every quiet pause, every moment of reconciliation on screen carried a whisper of his own story. The boy who learned to turn heartbreak into something timeless, powerful, and deeply human. Decades later, Spielberg would finally confront those same buried emotions head-on with The Fabelmans, a film deeply inspired by his own family's story. From those painful beginnings rose one of the most celebrated filmmakers in history. By 1968, his short film Amblin premiered at a festival and blew the minds of Universal Studios executives. In that moment, Spielberg realized filmmaking wasn't just something he loved, it was his destiny. Driven by pure ambition, he dropped out of college, took an unpaid internship at Universal, and even snuck into empty offices after hours to shoot his own scenes. Nothing could stop him. Not rules, not fear, not even exhaustion. In 1969, at just 22 years old, Spielberg made history by signing a long-term directing deal with Universal, becoming the youngest filmmaker in Hollywood ever to do so. He started small, directing TV episodes of Night Gallery and Columbo, learning the ropes and sharpening his instincts. But in 1971, everything changed with his made-for-TV movie Duel, an intense, nail-biting story about a man being hunted by a mysterious truck. The film was a smash hit, winning critical praise and opening the doors to the big screen for good. His feature debut, The Sugarland Express, 1974, hinted at the raw emotion and human depth he'd soon become famous for. But then came 1975, the year that changed Hollywood forever. Jaws roared into theaters and became a phenomenon no one saw coming. The terrifying story of a great white shark attacking a seaside town didn't just scare audiences, it redefined cinema itself. Grossing over $470 million worldwide, Jaws shattered box office records and invented the concept of the modern summer blockbuster. Spielberg later joked, "There were moments I thought the shark would eat me before we finished the movie. But that hungry beast didn't just make him sweat, it made him a legend." Jaws earned an Oscar nomination for Best Picture and turned Spielberg into a household name almost overnight. The hits kept coming. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 1982, proved he wasn't just a master of thrills and suspense. He was the heartbeat of wonder itself. His films made audiences feel to dream again, to believe in friendship, and to see magic in the everyday. Then came a bold evolution. Beyond aliens and adventure, Spielberg stepped into the realm of history and human truth. With Schindler's List, 1993, and Saving Private Ryan, 1998, he showed the world he could explore humanity's darkest and most courageous moments. Those films weren't just cinematic triumphs, they were emotional testaments to empathy, pain, and survival. In 1994, he co-founded DreamWorks, a studio that went on to deliver global sensations like Gladiator, Shrek, and Transformers. The 2000s marked another era of brilliance, with Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, and The Soul-Bearing Fabelmans, where Spielberg finally turned the camera inward, reflecting on his own path from a curious boy with a camera to the living legend of cinema he is today. Off-screen, Spielberg has remained remarkably private, a man whose quiet life contrasts sharply with the worlds he creates on film, but every movie he's ever made carries a piece of his truth, his fears, his hope, and his endless belief that even the darkest stories can still end with light. Away from the flashing lights and red carpet chaos, Steven Spielberg has always preferred quiet family moments, the kind that remind him what really matters. Despite being one of the most famous directors on the planet, he's known for his humility, warmth, and consistency. His first marriage was to actress Amy Irving, whom he met back in 1976 when she auditioned for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The connection was instant. They fell in love, and by 1985 they were married and welcoming their son, Max Samuel, into the world. But just 4 years later, in 1989, their marriage came to an emotional end. One that made headlines as one of Hollywood's most expensive divorces, reportedly around $100 million. Through heartbreak, success, and endless creativity, Spielberg never stopped doing what he was born to do, chasing stories that make people feel. From those backyard toy train films to billion-dollar blockbusters, his journey proves that passion, pain, and imagination can shape not just a filmmaker, but the very soul of modern cinema. Even after parting ways, Spielberg and Amy managed to maintain something beautiful: respect. They stayed close for the sake of their son, Max. Amy later said, "We did what was best for Max," showing the grace and maturity that defined their co-parenting. But soon after that chapter closed, a new love quietly began to write itself, one that would become Spielberg's greatest real-life story. During the casting for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984, he met actress Kate Capshaw, the fiery, unforgettable Willie Scott. From the moment Spielberg saw her screen test, he was completely captivated. "I watched Kate's audition and knew instantly she was perfect for the role," he recalled later with a smile. Kate, always quick with wit, once joked, "I never expected that all the screaming in that movie would bring me the man of my life." Their bond began slowly, built on long conversations about family, filmmaking, and life beyond Hollywood's spotlight. The sparks were obvious, but Spielberg was still married at the time, so their connection remained strictly professional. It wasn't until 1989, after his divorce from Amy Irving, that their friendship naturally evolved into something deeper. That same year, the two moved in together, ready to start a new chapter, one built on mutual respect, love, and shared purpose. Kate later shared, "We had grown close during filming, but it took time before it felt right to take that next step." Their love only grew stronger from there. Before their wedding, Kate made a deeply meaningful choice. She converted to Judaism out of respect for Spielberg's heritage. The couple tied the knot in 1991 in both a civil and Orthodox ceremony, surrounded by family and close friends. Spielberg later reflected, "When I married Kate, I rediscovered pride in my heritage and in the family we were building together." That union didn't just mark a new beginning. It became the emotional center of his life, grounding the man behind the camera in something real, steady, and full of heart. Their marriage soon became one of Hollywood's most admired love stories, a partnership built on loyalty, trust, and real connection. While most celebrity unions crumble under the spotlight, Stephen and Kate's bond only grew stronger, blending their families with warmth and grace. Kate came into the marriage with her daughter Jessica from a previous relationship, and Spielberg had his son Max from his marriage to Amy Irving. Together, they created a beautiful, close-knit family of 7. Jessica, Max, Theo, Sasha, Sawyer, Michaela, and Destry. Their household became a lively mix of art, laughter, and endless support, something rare in Hollywood. Now, over 34 years later, their love still stands strong. An almost legendary achievement in an industry built on fast fame and fragile connections. Kate chose to step back from acting to focus on raising their children and developing her passion for painting, while Spielberg continued to juggle massive film projects without ever letting family fall behind. Each of their kids grew up carving unique paths of their own. Max became a filmmaker and game designer, following in his father's creative footsteps. Jessica pursued acting, while Sawyer and Destry found their calling in the entertainment world too. Michaela made headlines in 2020 for choosing an unconventional career path in the adult industry, something she described as a personal, independent decision. The family's response? Respect and support, a reflection of Spielberg's core values: love without judgment and freedom to choose one's own way. Beyond his home life, Spielberg has always been more than just a legendary director. He's been a mentor, a father figure, and a protector for young actors growing up in the industry. One of the most famous examples is Drew Barrymore, who starred in E.T. as a child. "She needed support, and I was there," Spielberg once said. "It was both a duty and a joy." His care for young performers showed the heart of a man who valued humanity far more than fame. Now, well into his late 70s, Spielberg remains deeply devoted to his family. Though his children have grown and built their own careers, their bond with him remains unbreakable. "Family is the reason I make films," he once said. "Every story I tell comes from what I've learned about love, trust, and responsibility." Even at 79, Spielberg's creative spark burns bright. He's currently working on new projects like Disclosure Day and sequels to some of his most iconic franchises. With the same fire that drove him as a young dreamer decades ago. "I've never felt tired," he shared with a smile, eyes full of excitement. "Every film is another chance to tell a new story, and I never want to miss that." Recently, fans noticed a major transformation. Spielberg appeared slimmer, healthier, and more energized than ever. Dropping from around 95 kilograms to about 82, he's proving that passion and discipline can keep creativity alive at any age. He's told close collaborators that even though time changes everything, his imagination refuses to slow down. "I still see light in every project," he said proudly. "That's what keeps me young." In an industry as ruthless as Hollywood, Spielberg stands as living proof that persistence, love, and storytelling can outlast the ticking clock of fame. Decades at the top haven't made him cold or distant. He's still humble, curious, and endlessly inspired, a true master who never stops learning or dreaming. After the devastating events of December 14th, Spielberg's heartfelt tribute to Rob Reiner reminded the world that behind all the awards, fortune, and fame, there's something far more sacred: human connection. His words reflected the pain of an artist confronting life's fragility, mourning a friend whose heart matched his own in depth and passion. As Rob and Michelle's tragic passing sent shockwaves through Hollywood, Spielberg's reflection on Rob's legacy cut straight to the truth. No matter how bright the spotlight or how high the accolades, compassion is the real measure of greatness. No matter how big the awards or how bright the fame, Spielberg said, people and empathy remain the true heart of storytelling. So, as we remember Rob Reiner, a filmmaker whose work touched millions, we're reminded of what great cinema truly is: emotion, honesty, and humanity woven into every frame. If this story moved you, share your thoughts and memories in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep these powerful Hollywood stories alive. More incredible tales are coming soon.